Hi everyone, welcome to the next NLP Journal Club. Today we're looking at a paper called Revisiting Self-Training for Neural Sequence Generation by a bunch of guys from the Facebook AI research team and from Carnegie Mellon University. And the paper will be presented at ICLR 2020. So the paper is about self-training, which is a popular approach to semi-supervised training in natural language processing, especially has been gaining popularity in the last year or so, or 2 years. And the basic idea is to use some, given that you have an initial labeled dataset that you're using to train your supervised model, you're still interested in using some auxiliary dataset that you have available. Let's say if you're interested in the task of translation from English to German, maybe you have some you have so many English to English-German paired sentences, but you have a lot of English sentences existing on the internet, for example, that you want to somehow utilize to still be able to train an even better translation model using the extra data. And the paper is trying to investigate in which circumstances self-training works well, to try to find out some rules of thumb, and also investigate a few different flavors of self-training and to see how well they work on different tasks. And in particular, they test on machine translation and text summarization. And they're also interested in the general question of on which side the self-training approach is beneficial, or is it beneficial only on the target side, so generating synthetic target sentences, or also on synthetic source sentences. More about that I'm going to talk about in a second. But first, just to give you again a quick definition of self-training, like a more general one here. Given that you have your base labeled data set, let's say English and German sentences X and Y here, you train a base model f theta on those. And then what you do is you can repeat as many times as you want. You can repeat these steps. First, you apply your trained model on some unlabeled instances U. This could be like you have some extra English sentences. You apply it to generate some intermediate German translations. You then select a subset S of those generated German sentences, the most high quality ones, for example. And then you train a new model from scratch on this subset, plus on the additional original labeled data that you have available. And in this paper, they're actually taking this approach of, so you initialize a new model from scratch, and then you train the model first on the synthetic pairs, and then you fine-tune on the high-quality ground truth data that you have available, because you want, in your final epochs, you want your model to specialize and to do really well on this high-quality data. And you can repeat these steps. You can keep generating more and more sentences as long as you like, but obviously it's going to saturate at one point, and it will not be leading to any improvement anymore. So this is the basic approach to self-training, and there's also some flavors that they try out, like that I'm going to talk about in a second, like not just generating those, but also injecting some noise into those, like dropping words or shuffling, or you could also, well, one thing that they try is they train a model to generate paraphrases of the synthetic sentences. So they train a model, let's say for the same task of German to English, they actually train a model on this labeled data to go from German, not from English to German, but from German to English, and then from English to German back. In this way, generating paraphrases using the two models, and you can use these paraphrases, treat them as additional kind of pseudo-parallel pairs or synthetic pairs that you could use, and those are like more noisy pairs. But then going into more into the experiments of the paper, this is an interesting figure that they have here. First of all, on the WMT dataset, or 100,000 parallel pairs of this dataset, they train some baselines on this dataset. I believe this is again the German to English one, but I'm not 100% sure. So this baseline, train 100,000, and then they apply these different flavors of the self-training method on about 3 million, I think, additional sentences. I think it's the English side here, as far as I recall correctly. And as you can see, you're always getting some improvement in terms of blue on this by using the self-training, and also here they also try multiple iterations, and you're always getting some improvement, which seems to be decreasing with more and more iterations. And for those different flavors of self-training, this is in the green you have the basic approach of self-training, basically generating without applying any noise. And then you have two variants of noisy self-training in blue and in red here. In blue you have this step of applying these basic noises like dropping or shuffling. I don't recall precisely which ones they test here, but different perturbations to those synthetic sentences, and then training on even those ones in addition. And what you can see is that indeed you seem to be getting some benefit. Oh yeah, but by the way, also one distinction here, important one. The models here in the filled out colors, in the darker colors, are only trained on the synthetic pairs generated by the parallel baselines here, and so only on those, which is actually very interesting that you're able to get an improvement. So basically these models here in the bottom part are only trained on not hallucinations, but on the model's predictions, and not on labeled data, and still you're able to get to outperform the baseline, which is very interesting. And the models here in the lighter colors are further fine-tuned on the original parallel dataset to get even better performance. So then you have this in blue, this noisy self-training, and then in the red one you have the one based on paraphrases that I talked about a little bit earlier. So you generate the paraphrases, which is a type of noise. And this one seems to be working the best in this kind of low resource. This is a low resource example because you're only relying on 100,000 parallel examples to start with, and then you use the pseudo-parallel data. So this is an interesting result. They actually have a lot of different analysis of different configurations. They do stuff like comparing different ways of decoding, like beam search with or without dropout, or sampling with or without dropout. Sampling it leads typically to more diverse synthesized sentences versus beam search, which is a bit more conservative. They also find that dropout seems to be pretty important during training. Somehow it seems to be beneficial for this learning a better base model that will generate better synthetic sentences. They try out different data sets, like they have some low resource that I talked about just now with the 100,000 parallel plus 3 million monolingual. I think this is the same result here. And they also have some experiments starting with in the high resource setting 3.9 million English-German sentences, and then adding some self-training on 20 million additional monolingual sentences. What they find is that logically the self-training approach is particularly much more beneficial when you have much less parallel pairs to start with. So you're getting like This is the baseline train on the 100,000, and then using the noisy self-training, you're getting like 6 blue improvement. For the high resource setting, you're getting like 1 blue improvement, which is also still pretty impressive, pretty cool, but not as dramatic as the 6 blue, I suppose. And they have also some very focused analysis to try to determine like which components and why does self-training work at all, and which setup works the best. I will leave you to explore this at your own time. But yeah, it seems that this noisy self-training here, they have, for example, seems to be consistently working better than the baseline, which is not noisy. So noise seems to be helping a lot. However, there has to be a good balance of noise. For example, here, they test some different noise levels, I think for this dropping task, dropping noise approach. And it seems that if you have too much noise, you can also get some drop in performance. So 0.2 or so noise, so dropping 0.2% of the words, 20% of the words seems to be a good balance here. And also they test on the task of automatic summarization, where they also get, where is this summarization result? Oh yeah, here. Well, again, using different configurations of different static parallel datasets, and self-training seems to be beneficial, in particular, again, for the low resource summarization setting, but can also be helpful even for the high resource setup on this gigaword dataset, which is sentence compression. Actually, it's given the first sentence of a news article, generate a headline of it. So there's other interesting analysis in the paper. I'm going to leave you at that, and it seems that self-training is a pretty useful approach to help you to integrate some monolingual raw data that you don't know what to do with to help you improve your base models. And it's interesting to see how this could be extended even more in the future. So can this also would be interesting for me, whether this could be used somehow to completely unsupervised, or just use the somehow raw data on its own and still be able to use the self-training to come up with a model that can still do some the job, let's say, of translation to some extent, similar to some work we have seen on unsupervised machine translation. So with that, I'm going to leave you, and thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and talk to you next time.